Hey guys, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to start talking about this unbelievably tragic case that I feel like has been very mishandled by law enforcement. This picture next to me is 12-year-old Sean Daugherty. He died at his home, and I'm going to tell you his story. This first video is going to be his family's perspective of that day. His death was ruled an unaliving that he did himself. I absolutely do not agree with that, and the family has started a social media campaign, and they have a petition at change.org. They are desperately trying to get his case reopened and re-examined by another agency. And I think after we go over this, you're going to see why. And I hope that you will also sign their petition. So let's dive into this. I told you yesterday, it's a lot. And if it gets to be too long of a video, I will find a good stopping point and then make a second video to finish. I don't know how much of this I'll get through. I have about 22 pages of notes. So here we go. On April 14th, 2022, Sean Daugherty passed away unexpectedly at his home in Yorktown, Virginia, under very suspicious circumstances. He was a 6th grader at Tab Middle School and was just 12 years old. That Thursday, April 14th, 2022, was a normal day in the Daugherty Rivas house. Sean lived with his mom, Ramona, stepdad, Jared, older sister, Maria, who was 16 years old and a sophomore at the time, his 2 younger half-brothers, who were just 5 and 2 at the time. His 79-year-old grandma, Viha, also lived with them. Ramona and Jared were both lieutenant colonels in the Air Force. This proud military family lived on Sandalwood Lane in Yorktown, Virginia. They were a tight-knit group who kept to themselves. They had lived there for a few years but hadn't made any close friends on the block because of the Rona. That made socializing difficult. But the kids had friends, and the family would wave and make small talk with the neighbors. Sandalwood Lane is located in the Wythe Creek Farms HOA. It's known for pristine lawns, low fences, and immaculate upkeep. The idyllic neighborhood gave Sean's family a false sense of security. They didn't install a security system and felt so safe in their house that the doors were seldom locked. The family had just sold the house and were preparing for a move to Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon. His mom had just got a job at the Pentagon, and Sean was super excited about it. They were set to move in a few weeks. The entire week, everyone had been in great spirits. The week before had been spring break, and the family had gone on a Disney cruise. They had such a great time that on Tuesday evening, April 12th, Ramona had taken Sean to the library to renew his passport because they had booked a second Disney cruise for August, going to Alaska. Everyone, especially Sean, was excited for the trip. Sean was a straight-A student and a gifted musician. When interviewed, his friends, teachers, and fellow students recalled him as being happy, laughing in class, being excited, and could not remember anything out of the norm that day. Sean's mom talked to them all too, and they echoed the same sentiment, that Sean was not a troubled child and he exuded happiness that day. On April 14th, 2022, Sean got off the school bus and walked past 2 houses to his front door. His grandma was home watching his youngest brother. She had received a call from her doctor saying that she needed to go in and get an EKG, and the appointment would take about 25 minutes. She was exiting the house just as Sean's mom was pulling up to take her to the appointment. Sean happily agreed to watch his brother for the hour that they would be gone. He loved to babysit. His mom called him from the car, and Sean said he had homework to do and would do his chores before gaming with his friends. He submitted his assignments online, with one of them including a photo of himself holding up his work at 3:09 p.m. Nothing was out of place. Ramona called Sean a second time from the car. She had just spoken to her husband. Now, her husband was about 45 minutes away at an appointment with the 5-year-old. So she had just spoken to her husband, who told her that their 2-year-old had been napping for almost 2 hours and needed to be woken up or he'd never sleep that night. Ramona asked Sean to wake him up, give him a snack, and maybe watch a movie with him downstairs where his brother was sleeping on the couch. Sean laughed and said, "Mom, I'm pooping." "I got it." His bathroom was on the second floor. Ramona called a third and final time from the car at 3:27 p.m., and Sean answered right away. She realized he'd been excited to play his game with his friends and suggested that Sean bring his brother upstairs with him so he wouldn't have to change his plans. Sean loved this idea and said he would get his brother all set up on an iPad upstairs with him. She told him where the iPad was charging on the second floor so he could grab it and get everything set up. Before he woke up his brother, Sean got himself a snack. One of his favorite after-school snacks was jarred peaches. He took them out of the fridge and placed one in a bowl. At 3:30, an alarm on his watch went off to remind him to do his chore. And I can so relate to this because my daughter has an alarm set on her phone for something that she does every day for us. And I sometimes think if that didn't go off, she probably would forget. So the alarm went off on his watch. Then he was supposed to do his chore, and his chore that day was to take out the trash. He went upstairs and gathered the trash for the 2 upstairs bathrooms and came downstairs to gather the trash in the kitchen. And this is where everything gets weird. The kitchen trash was never taken out. His Crocs were found next to the trash in the kitchen. No one in the house ever went barefoot. In fact, Sean had a strange thing about being barefoot. He never walked around like that. He couldn't stand it. I'm the opposite. I hate to wear shoes. I love to be barefoot. So what happened as he was gathering the trash? Sean's 2-year-old brother recalls only that there was a friend chasing Sean around, punching him. He also said the man touched his arm. So is there someone in the house? And if so, who? Ramona's last call before she entered the appointment was the last time she or anyone else spoke to Sean. He never logged in to play Fortnite with his friends. He never took the iPad off the charger for his brother. His Crocs were found upside down next to the trash, and the trash was never taken out. On the counter sat an untouched jarred peach. Maria, Sean's older sister, had been at her tennis match after school. She was rushing home because her boyfriend AJ and his mom were picking her up to go to AJ's lacrosse game. When she got home, the front door was locked. She rang the bell and she knocked, but no one answered. She called her mom, who told Maria to call Sean and said he was probably gaming upstairs. Maria called Sean twice and texted him 3 times at 4:50 p.m. and got no response. She decided to run around back to see if she could get in the back door, and that's when she saw him. She froze in shock as she tried to process what she was seeing. A person was hanging from their swing set with a nylon bag over their head. She looked around the yard and locked eyes with a landscaper mowing the neighbor's yard, who was also puzzled and just standing there. Walking towards the swing set, she called out, "Hello?" but got no response. Still trying to process what she was seeing, she realized the hands and legs looked familiar. It was Sean. Hysterically, she ran to him and confirmed it was her brother by looking closely at his hands, which were bound to his waist by a belt. His hands were discolored by a lack of circulation. Maria lifted her brother with one arm, hoping to release the pressure from his head. She used her other hand to call 911 at 4:54 p.m. She removed him from his hanging position by simply lifting the shoelace-type string over his head with 3 fingers. She put him on the ground and performed CPR for 6 minutes with the assistance of the 911 dispatcher until EMTs took over. Sean was dressed in his stepdad's clothes. His arms were so tightly bound to his waist that the EMTs made note of how difficult it had been to remove it. They had to unbuckle and move it so that they could shock his heart with the AED. He had a nylon bag over his head, and his glasses were broken and found nearby. His eyesight was so poor that he could not see without his glasses. How could this 12-year-old boy suspend himself in such an awkward position with a bag over his head while his hands were belted so tightly to his waist without being able to see? Picture this in your mind. His arms were strapped straight down to his side with a belt around his abdomen so tight that they could not move them. He had the bag over his head and then a shoelace type string around, and his glasses were off to the side and broken. He's barefoot in his stepdad's clothes. It doesn't make sense. He was suspended by his chin, so here, not around here like you would expect for someone hanging. It was under his chin. He was suspended by his chin, not his neck. At any point, he could have stood up and saved himself, but he didn't. His bare feet were dragging on the ground, and his bent knees were just inches from the ground as well. Normal hanging injuries were not present. It looked like he had been killed somewhere else and propped ornamentally outside, displayed in men's clothing and suspended like a doll. His knees were so close to the ground that you could see the bottom of his feet, and they were perfectly clean. How could he walk barefoot from the house to the swing set in the backyard in April and have clean feet? Ramona arrived home from the appointment to find her house swarming with emergency personnel. She ran towards the commotion and found them working on Sean. Because of the heroic efforts of his sister, they were able to get a heartbeat, but there was not enough electricity to sustain it. They would find out later that Sean had actually been gone for some time, and there was no chance he could have been revived. During all the chaos in the backyard, Ramona realized her 2-year-old was not out there. She and Maria ran to the house. Ramona turned the knob and it opened. It was unlocked. They ran in with an officer right behind them. They saw the Crocs upside down next to the 2 closed trash bags ready to be taken out. She looked around the living room for her toddler and noticed 2 little legs hiding beneath a pile of laundry in a chair. She yelled his name, picked him up. He opened his eyes and started crying. He was really limp and just out of it. He didn't seem like his normal self. Ramona ran to the front door. It was locked, as Maria had told her. They opened the door and went to the front yard, where she saw a neighbor nearby standing with a landscaper. She ran up asking if they had seen what happened, and the neighbor said no. The landscaper mumbled, "I don't know him who did it." She ran to the neighbor on the other side, who was mowing his grass, and he too said he hadn't seen anything. The fence was only 3 feet tall, but no matter who she asked, no one knew or saw anything. One neighbor had cameras on this house pointed at Sean's yard, but they were disconnected and hadn't been recording in years. At the hospital, Ramona was told that Sean was gone. She went into the room, and he was on the gurney, covered to his chin with a blanket. His face was peaceful and unharmed. There was no swelling, his teeth were all intact, and the intubation tube was still in. He had a neck collar on, and his eyes were half open, clear, green, and not swollen. There was no redness or damage that she could see. She opened his eyelids and saw his pupils were blown. She grabbed his left hand to hold it one last time and noticed blood in between his fourth and fifth fingers. Something told her to take pictures with her phone. Later, she would notice that these photos clearly show the marks on his wrist from being bound by the belt, even though the medical examiner's report says by the time she received the body, there were no marks. Ramona stood up and lifted his arm to take a picture. This is when she realized Sean was wearing her husband's dress shirt. He was also wearing his stepdad's underwear. The police made Ramona leave, declaring it a crime scene. The house was also locked down by investigators. One of the officers told Jared that he knew something was off when he arrived, saying, "This doesn't sit right with me. I don't think your son did this to himself." However, it seemed clear that one of the detectives who was part of the investigation team that was brought in that night thought it was suicide. Sean had never given any indication of depression or unalighting ideations. While the family could not be in the home, they went to a hotel 20 minutes away at Langley Air Force Base. Ramona asked her 2-year-old what he and Sean had done that day. This is when he told her that a friend came over and was punching Sean while demonstrating punching motions with his fists. At around midnight, Jared got a call saying investigators had cleared the house and they could go back in. The family wondered how they could be done so soon. The family packed up and drove back home. Ramona walked into the kitchen and saw the peach in the bowl on the counter. She noticed the 2 trash bags tied up on the floor and Sean's Crocs turned upside down on the floor in front of the bags. She opened the trash drawer and saw that Sean had lined it with 2 new bags. She also noticed 2 additional garbage bags on the floor, all ripped up. They weren't their bags. The torn up bags had blue handles. The family used bags with red handles. The torn bags had large rips in the middle on the side. Everyone wanted to go upstairs to go to sleep. Ramona and Jared walked up to look around. It felt really hot upstairs. Someone had turned the thermostat to 85 degrees. Ramona walked into their bedroom and found Sean's underwear on the floor in the path between the bedroom door and the master bathroom. Jared grabbed some gloves and a Ziploc bag and they bagged the underwear for investigators. Jared's dresser drawers were also open. What happened in this room? Why weren't the underwear collected? Jared immediately called police and asked them to send a patrol car over because they didn't feel safe. What if the person who had done this to Sean came back? Jared locked all the doors and barricaded them with chairs. The next morning, Jared called and asked the investigators to come over to discuss what they had found the night before. AJ's mom, Jamie, brought over some food and started cleaning up the kitchen for Ramona. While sweeping around the kitchen table, she noticed a very large handprint on the window of the back door. Ramona took a look, and it was larger than anyone's hand in the house. It was in a weird spot, really high on the window pane. It seemed like there had been something on the hand, a residue or film, something that really made the print stand out. The investigative team arrived at the house. Some went upstairs, some to the backyard, and 2 sat at the dining room table interviewing Ramona and Maria. They asked if Sean had any enemies, if he had been bullied, and asked if he had had a bad day at school. They showed Ramona a video of Sean walking the hall with a buddy at the middle school, and nothing seemed out of the norm. He was bouncing around and joking with his friend. The video helped them identify the jacket, flannel, and shorts he was wearing. The jacket and flannel were found hanging together in the house, but they could not locate his shirt or shorts. Investigators told them they had taken Sean's iPhone, laptop, and iPad the night before. They reluctantly took Sean's underwear that Ramona had bagged the night before, but did not provide a receipt. She pointed out the handprint on the door and asked them to lift it to see if they could find a match for the prints. There hadn't been any fingerprints taken the night before. Why wouldn't you take fingerprints when you're there to investigate this? I mean, on the dresser drawers that were pulled out, on the doorknobs, on the locks. I mean, there's so many different places. And then if they noticed that handprint on the window, how come the investigators didn't? A few weeks later, the lead investigator told them they did get a good print from the lift of the handprint, but there were not any matches in the system. A month later, investigators came back for more prints, but said there weren't any good prints lifted and nothing viable to test. Sean's underwear were never sent out for testing, and they don't know what happened to them. On the day Sean died, investigators had advised Ramona and Jared against disclosing details of the incident to anyone. Rumors were flying, neighbors whispered about what had happened, people wondered why it hadn't been on the news. Concerned community members called the sheriff's office and were told there was nothing to be afraid of. Investigators called Jared a few times to talk about the clothes Sean was dressed in and also the bag that was found over his head. They explained that it was a silver gray bag with black SHOEI on it. Immediately, Jared remembered the old motorcycle helmet bags he had in the garage in a pile for Goodwill. I have a picture here of that type of bag. Hang on just a minute. So it's this type of bag that he had over his head. Hang on. Okay, so that's my daughter. It's this type of bag, and as we will learn as we go, it's that type of string that was under his chin. Ramona and Jared went into the garage and found one of the bags missing. The other bag was still there, but missing the string. Someone had taken the string out of the two bags and used that to suspend Sean. With Jared and Ramona both being military, they had accrued a lot of gear over the years. They had boxes and duffels of rope, cords, and military-grade 550 paracord all over the garage. Sean knew where all of that was at because the family used the ropes and cords for various projects. It seemed as if someone had opened the garage door and grabbed the first thing they could find. They also noticed that a bunch of their boots in the garage had been partially unlaced. Sean also had his own drawstring gym bags in his room, so why wouldn't he have used one of those? Why not grab a necktie while allegedly dressing himself in his stepdad's clothes? Investigators asked Jared about the clothes found on Sean. Ramona had taken pictures at the hospital of the shirt, but none of the pants because they were not on Sean when they brought him in. When investigators described them, they sounded like a pair of Jared's jeans, but the family was never shown a picture of either the jeans or the belt. They have not been given access to that discovery. Still. Let's put Sean back up here. Okay. Damage control was in full effect, and the unaliving narrative was being pushed hard by Sheriff's Office. They seemed to be working harder on pushing the narrative than actually investigating. On Monday, April 18th, a representative from the Sheriff's Office visited Sean's classes and spoke to his classmates about unaliving and informed them of Sean's passing. Ramona received a call that had all of Sean's 6th grade teachers on the line at the same time. They did not believe Sean would unalive himself. They stated that Sean submitted his homework that afternoon, had walked with them to class, and was in a great mood that day. They were in shock. Some of Sean's peers, including his best friend, were interviewed. The parents later called Ramona to tell her the line of questioning made them uncomfortable, and that it made them feel like investigators were only looking at unaliving as a manner of death. This was not the Sean they and their kids knew, so it made no sense. Ramona and Jared visited neighbors to ask if they had seen anything on their security cameras. They asked if the investigators had requested the footage and were told they had not. that seems like one of the first things you would ask for, right? Is the surveillance footage. Do you have anything on your cameras? Do you have anything on your Ring doorbell? The neighbors were never asked by investigators. Ramona and Jared had several calls with the medical examiner regarding her findings. The lead investigator was listed as being present during the autopsy. The medical examiner was given the articles of clothing on Sean's body, the string found on his neck, and the belt that had strapped his arms down. She sent several samples off for testing. When the medical examiner was done with the body, it was released and driven to Southern Pines, North Carolina for the funeral. The autopsy report states that Sean was found partially suspended by a shoelace-type string that was tied to the swing set. While hanging there was reportedly a nylon bag over his head and a belt strapped around his abdomen, pinning both of his arms to his side. It is noted that he was wearing his stepfather's clothes and was barefoot. His glasses were on the ground nearby. No note was found. In the parents' bedroom, Sean's underwear was on the floor. The dresser drawers were open. It is noted that no known history of depression or unaliving thoughts was found. The report notes that the police investigation raised the possibility of bullying at school, but his family said that except for one incident in December, they're unaware of any other bullying, and Sean didn't seem overly upset by it. The medical examiner ultimately ruled Sean's death an unaliving. The family has recently launched a social media campaign and want the case reopened. They also started a petition on change.org called What Happened to Sean in hopes of someone reopening the case. The family's campaign prompted the York-Poquoson Sheriff's Office to respond, saying the death was fully investigated. Major Ron Montgomery said, "We take these matters very seriously, evaluate all evidence, and consider all possibilities. Much of the information being posted on social media is opinion, innuendo, and fabrication, which is not consistent with the evidence that was collected by investigators." The medical examiner's office also made a statement saying that in cases where a family disagrees with a cause of death, they are given an opportunity to present any new information. In cases where the family suspects that someone killed their loved one, we ask families to contact the investigating law enforcement agency immediately to express their concerns. We advise that law enforcement should be involved as they need to conduct the necessary follow-up on new information. If LE determines the information to be pertinent to our death investigation, then they will present it to our office, and the medical examiner will evaluate this new information to determine if cause and or manner of death needs to be amended. So there you go. That is all from the family. Their post on Facebook. There's a group called What Happened to Sean. I find this very disturbing, you guys. I feel like you probably will too. In light of all the cases that we've covered here lately, like Kylie especially, it just sounds like, and I've told you this a million times, I am pro law enforcement, but I will point out when I think they're screwing up, and this seems like lazy police work. Somebody assumed it was an unaliving, and they did not do a proper investigation, in my opinion. My channel, my opinion. They didn't take fingerprints until a month later. They didn't want to take the underwear, and then when they did, apparently they lost it. They didn't question the neighbors. They didn't ask for the security footage. They dropped the ball. They really dropped the ball. And how anybody could look at this 12-year-old boy with his arms strapped tightly to his side with a bag over his head and think that he did that to himself Somebody reenact that for me because I would love to see how that could happen. Why would he turn in his homework? Why would he get himself a snack? Why would he gather the trash? If he was going to do this, it's hard enough to get your kid to do their homework and do their chores anyway. If they were going to do this to themselves, I don't think they're going to take the time to do their homework and gather up the trash. It just doesn't make sense. And he didn't finish gathering the trash. He got the upstairs trash, but then he didn't take it out. I don't know. I feel like somebody was there. Somebody came to the house and did something to Sean. And with the string being under his chin rather than around his neck, I don't think that that's how he died. And they said that the normal injuries weren't present. Well, I would expect sometimes, not always, the hyoid to be broken and for there to be petechiae in his eyes, those little tiny pinpoint red dots. His mom didn't see any of that. His eyes weren't red, they weren't swollen, nothing. I don't know what happened, but I don't think that Sean did this to himself. You guys can let me know what you think. I will link the petition in the description if you want to go and sign it at change.org, What Happened to Sean. And I will be doing more digging into this case and discussing it further. Like I said, I wanted to give you the story from his parents' perspective because I want you to see how they saw it and what they dealt with, what they encountered from investigators and the medical examiner and things like that. But let me know what you think about this case, and thank you for stopping by and spending a little time with me to learn about Sean's case. In my poll, it looked like it was about half and half. Some of you had heard of it and some of you hadn't. Give it a thumbs up because I want to get it seen as much as possible. I really want to help their social media campaign. I really want to help get this family story out there and maybe, hopefully, get this investigation reopened and looked at better because I don't feel like it was looked at properly the first time around. So I love you all. Thank you for being here, and I will see you all in the next one.